Did Blake Lively try to extort Taylor Swift?
So we have a wild Justin Baldoni versus Blake Lively update. Taylor Swift has ditched Blake Lively.
We've got these messages about, this long friendship between these two girls, and she knows the real Taylor.
The information that Blake may have shared with her bestie, Taylor Swift, this information could be the end of Blake Lively.
Taylor Swift had been threatened and blackmailed by Blake Lively,
who is highly likely to have reliable information that Miss Lively requested that Taylor Swift delete their text messages.
What could make Taylor Swift, one of the most loyal and private celebrities in the world, completely cut off one of her closest friends without a warning, without a second chance, and without ever looking back? This isn't just a celebrity fallout. It's a full-blown PR war, a betrayal buried beneath sweet Instagram captions and red carpet smiles. And at the center of it all, Taylor Swift and Blake Lively, two women who once seemed inseparable, now locked in a silent battle that's spilling into courtrooms, headlines, and private email threats.
Blake Lively specifically going through the court system makes people believe that she is no longer working with Taylor Swift.
You see, behind the polished friendships in Hollywood, there's often a quiet power game playing out. Fame, influence, access, it all has a price, and sometimes that price is trust. So what really happened between Taylor and Blake? Why did their years-long friendship end in absolute silence, and what role did lies, manipulation, and even legal threats play in tearing them apart? Let's break it all down, because the truth behind this story is darker, messier, and far more personal than anyone expected. To the public, Taylor Swift and Blake Lively seemed like the perfect example of celebrity besties. They shared laughs at award shows. Blake posted affectionate shout-outs. Taylor hosted her at secret getaways. Even at the Super Bowl, Blake was seen cheering beside Taylor as if nothing could ever come between them. But behind the scenes, that picture-perfect friendship was already showing cracks. Blake, a mother of 4 and star of the upcoming film It Ends With Us, had a hectic press tour ahead. Taylor, meanwhile, was dominating stages across the globe with her record-shattering Eras tour and carving out rare pockets of time with her new boyfriend, Travis Kelce. Life was pulling them in different directions, but that wasn't the issue. According to sources close to both sides, the real problem wasn't the distance, it was the distortion. You see, while promoting her film, Blake repeatedly credited Taylor for being a guiding force in the project. She claimed Taylor helped her make decisions about music, casting, and even editing. She made it sound like Taylor was in the room every step of the way, but that just wasn't true.
Taylor stated that she was not involved at all, and this is in stark contrast to what Lively has said.
Taylor wasn't involved in any of it. Yes, she licensed a song for the film, but that was a standard business deal, nothing more. No creative meetings, no late-night script edits, no production notes, just a signed licensing agreement, a check, and that was it. So why was Blake out there saying otherwise? That's where things started to feel off. Sources say Taylor initially chalked it up to miscommunication or exaggeration. She was too busy to micromanage every quote from her friends, but even she couldn't ignore what happened next, because Blake wasn't just name-dropping her. She was building an entire narrative around Taylor's supposed involvement, and once that lie started snowballing, it became harder and more dangerous for Taylor to stay silent. But that wasn't the only moment things got strange, because what happened next at a penthouse meeting none of us saw coming, and it will change everything. A T. First, Taylor didn't notice the storm forming around her name. While Blake was out promoting It Ends With Us, painting Taylor as a behind-the-scenes force who helped shape the film, Taylor was thousands of miles away, lost in a whirlwind of stadium lights, choreography, and sold-out shows. She wasn't checking interviews. She wasn't scrolling headlines. She wasn't watching what her so-called best friend was saying. And Blake knew that. That's what makes this next part sting even more. Because while Taylor was focused on performing, Blake was spinning a different narrative to the press. She made it seem like Taylor had been involved with the film at every step, like she had personally helped her fire a composer, like she was deeply embedded in the editing process, like she was a creative partner, not just a friend, except none of that happened. Taylor hadn't read the script. She hadn't seen any early cuts. She hadn't given feedback on music or casting. Her only connection to the project was a single licensing agreement for one of her songs, nothing more. There were no favors, no backdoor collaborations, no whispered advice behind the scenes. Blake made it all up. Why? According to someone deeply familiar with both sides of the situation, it was simple: clout. Blake wanted her movie to succeed. And in Hollywood, having Taylor Swift's name attached to your project even loosely isn't just helpful, it's powerful. It opens doors. It changes headlines. It makes makes people care, so Blake used it. And while Taylor was unaware, the media picked up on Blake's quotes and ran with them. Suddenly, Taylor was being credited with decisions she didn't make. Fans started believing she was part of the creative team. Journalists began treating her like a silent producer. And when things in the press started going sideways, when backlash started forming, guess whose name was tied to it? Taylor's. It wasn't just inaccurate, it was damaging. But here's the thing, Taylor didn't even realize any of this was happening.
It's just deranged. It's nonsensical. Like, fire the whole PR team. It's dumb.
She was in Europe, finishing the final leg of her tour. She wasn't reading gossip sites or skimming entertainment blogs. She didn't know her name was being dragged into a movie she had nothing to do with, not yet. But everything would change when she walked into a penthouse suite and came face to face with someone who shouldn't have been there. Because that's when the lie became personal and the feeling of being exploited became undeniable. Taylor had no reason to expect anything out of the ordinary that day. She was in between tour dates, finally getting a short break from the chaos, and had agreed to stop by a penthouse where Blake was staying. It was framed as a casual hangout, a quick visit between friends, but when she walked through the door, something immediately felt wrong, because Justin was already there. Justin Baldoni, the director of It Ends With Us, the man behind the project Blake had been tirelessly promoting, the man Taylor barely knew. He was sitting there like he'd been waiting for her. Taylor hadn't been told he would be there. No heads up, no warning, no agenda. Just suddenly placed in a situation where she was expected to mingle with someone she had no professional connection to about a movie she hadn't touched. And that's when it hit her. This wasn't a hangout. It was a setup. According to sources close to the situation, Taylor instantly got an icky feeling. The kind of feeling that doesn't scream danger but screams manipulation. She could sense it in the way the conversation turned, the subtle nudges, the way she was encouraged to talk about the film, to smile for a few photos, to maybe even drop a quote or two that could be used later. It was as if Blake was trying to create proof. Proof that Taylor was involved, proof that she supported the project, proof that would justify all the things Blake had been telling the press. And Taylor wasn't having it. She stayed polite, of course. She's always been media trained and graceful in public. But behind the scenes, that moment triggered something deeper. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was strategic, calculated, the kind of move you don't expect from a friend, but from someone playing chess while you thought you were catching up over coffee. After that encounter, the friendship was never quite the same. Taylor walked away from that penthouse knowing she had been used. And even though she didn't blow up about it right away, even though she didn't go public or make a scene, she never forgot the feeling. Because once you realize someone's willing to stage a moment with you for their own gain, how do you ever see them the same again? That was the beginning of the unraveling. But things would get much worse, because not long after that, Taylor would see something with her own eyes, something she couldn't unsee, a text thread, a nickname, a weaponization of her identity that crossed every line. And when she read those messages, the friendship wasn't just strained. It was over.
Ryan and Blake, what are you doing? Disney's mad at you. Taylor Swift's mad at you. Was this really worth it? All because what? He called you sexy? This is an embarrassment, guys.
If you looked at photos from that late August birthday party, you'd never know something was off. Taylor had invited Blake to her Rhode Island home for an intimate celebration. The sunset was perfect, the guest list was tight, and everything looked fine. But the cracks were already spidering beneath the surface. Taylor was trying. That much is clear. She hadn't publicly addressed Blake's exaggerations about her role in It Ends With Us. She hadn't said a word about the awkward penthouse encounter. Maybe she was giving Blake the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she hoped the whole thing would just blow over. But things didn't blow over. They built up quietly, strategically, and with every new media appearance Blake made, Taylor's name was dragged deeper into the narrative without her consent. Still, Taylor stayed quiet. That birthday party was their last real moment together. After that, they only saw each other once more in October, and according to those close to the situation, the vibe was cold. The kind of cold you can't fake your way through. Short conversations, careful words, like two people who both know something's wrong but aren't ready to say it out loud. And then, silence. The holidays came and went with no sightings, no photos, no posts. But in the background, things were accelerating fast, because Blake's movie wasn't just facing criticism, it was facing serious legal trouble. A CRD complaint had been filed, lawsuits were coming, accusations were flying, and Taylor. She found herself dragged into the middle of it. At first, she was still sympathetic. She'd always been protective of her inner circle. She knew Blake was under pressure, and maybe, just maybe, some of the things being said about her were exaggerated, but then she saw the texts, and that changed everything. Because once Taylor saw how her name had really been used, how she'd been called a dragon and a threat, how she'd been falsely positioned as the muscle behind Blake's decisions, there was no coming back from that. This wasn't friendship anymore. It was exploitation. Taylor wasn't just upset, she was done. And from that point forward, Blake's calls went unanswered. Her voice memos were ignored. Every olive branch was met with silence, but Blake wouldn't stop, and what she did next only made things worse. Because when someone shows you who they are and you keep trying to spin a new version of the story, it's only a matter of time before the truth shatters everything. For a while, Taylor stayed silent. She didn't make a statement. She didn't push back publicly. She didn't even tell her team to respond to Blake's narrative. But that didn't mean she wasn't paying attention anymore. Because once Taylor saw the texts, the game changed. According to someone close to the situation, Taylor had been warned by others that Blake was constantly name-dropping her, using her name in meetings, interviews, and even private negotiations to add weight to her own words. But Taylor had always assumed it wasn't that deep, maybe just a friend caught up in the excitement of promotion. But it wasn't excitement, it was strategy. And when Taylor read the messages, she finally saw the receipts. One text in particular stood out: Blake calling Taylor a dragon. It might have seemed like a compliment if it wasn't used in a context that made Taylor out to be some kind of weapon. Blake was name-dropping her to pressure people, to win arguments, to assert dominance. It was Taylor as a threat, Taylor as leverage, not Taylor as a friend. And it didn't stop there. In the texts, Blake had claimed Taylor supported specific decisions on the film, decisions Taylor hadn't even known were being made, editing changes, composer firings, casting shifts, all pinned to Taylor's name. All completely false. It was betrayal, plain and simple. Taylor realized she hadn't just been casually misrepresented, she'd been turned into a tool, a bargaining chip, a status symbol to be wielded in backroom deals and power plays. Her silence had been mistaken for permission, and now it was hurting her brand, her image, and most importantly, her trust. The betrayal ran deeper than just PR spin. Because if Blake was willing to lie about her, what else was she lying about? That question stuck with Taylor. She didn't know the full truth about the harassment allegations. She didn't know the ins and outs of the lawsuits, but now she didn't need to. Blake's willingness to lie about her, to weaponize their friendship, was proof enough. Proof that she couldn't be trusted. Proof that anything she said about anyone was now suspect. And that was the moment Taylor made her decision. No more conversations, no more second chances, no public reconciliations, no soft PR walkbacks. Taylor wasn't going to be anyone's pawn, and she sure as hell wasn't going to be anyone's shield. From that point forward, Blake was shut out completely, but Blake didn't take the hint. She kept pushing, kept spinning, and when Taylor refused to play along, Blake crossed one more line, this time involving lawyers. And that's when everything exploded. When someone you once called a friend starts sending legal threats through their attorney. That's not just drama, that's war. By early February, Taylor wasn't talking to Blake at all. No texts, no calls, no polite brush-offs, just silence. She was done. But Blake, she wasn't ready to let go, and that desperation pushed her to do something that shattered whatever thread of trust was still dangling. According to sources close to Taylor, Blake's team made contact with Taylor's legal team, and not in a friendly way. The message? If Taylor didn't speak out in support of Blake, or at the very least stay quiet, then certain text messages would be leaked. Messages that Blake allegedly claimed would damage Taylor's reputation if taken out of context. Let that sink in. This wasn't a request. This was a threat. Taylor's team immediately flagged the communication as an attempted extortion. And just like that, this wasn't just a personal fallout anymore. It was a legal situation. Blake wasn't just trying to save her reputation, she was threatening Taylor's. But Taylor wasn't bluffing. And she wasn't backing down. Instead of responding with fear, she responded with evidence. Her team handed over a digital paper trail, the email exchange from Blake's legal rep, the text messages Blake had referenced, and confirmation that Taylor had never made the statements Blake was alluding to. She gave it all to Wayfair, the company at the center of the legal case involving It Ends With Us, as part of a cooperation agreement, and in return, Taylor was left alone. She avoided a deposition. She wasn't subpoenaed. She never had to appear. In court, she gave them what they needed to prove her innocence and Blake's dishonesty, and then walked away. No more favors. No more silence. Taylor's move sent a clear message. She wouldn't be bullied, manipulated, or dragged into a legal mess she had no part in. And behind the scenes, Blake was spiraling. She kept trying to control the narrative through PR. She floated stories about reconciliation. She had sources plant quotes claiming she and Taylor were working on things, that they were still friends, that everything would blow over. But Taylor's camp quickly shut that down. One insider didn't mince words. Taylor hates her. Another said Taylor wishes she had never met her. And the not invited to the Super Bowl narrative. That wasn't just a social snub, it was a public signal. Blake hadn't chosen to skip the event. She was never on the guest list to begin with. Behind the media spin, Blake was being iced out. Taylor wasn't just avoiding her, she was cutting off every channel. No texts, no replies, no reconciliation, because after lies, manipulation, and legal threats, what's left? Absolutely nothing. But even after all this, Blake still wouldn't stop. And what she did next only made things worse. In Hollywood, perception is everything. And no one understands that better than Blake. For years, Blake Lively had crafted the image of the perfect celebrity friend, warm, funny, effortlessly stylish, and deeply connected. And her friendship with Taylor Swift, that was gold. It wasn't just real, it was PR perfection. The kind of bond that gave Blake more legitimacy, more relevance, more trust in the eyes of fans. So when that friendship died, so did a major part of Blake's public armor. And that's why, even after the silence, the legal threats, the receipts, and the fallout, Blake still wouldn't stop pushing the "we're fine" narrative. Because she knew that if Taylor ever publicly confirmed they weren't friends anymore, it would shatter the carefully constructed version of events she had sold to the public. The truth was, Taylor's word or her refusal to speak at all carried more power than any press release, and that silence? It was louder than a statement. Every time a tabloid suggested they were reconnecting, Taylor's team shot it down behind the scenes. Every time Blake tried to position herself as the victim of miscommunication, Taylor's people made it crystal clear they are not friends, not on a break, not pausing, not healing, done. And for Blake, that truth was a ticking time bomb. Because if your best friend doesn't believe you, if the person you used as a shield, a selling point, a credibility card wants nothing to do with you, what does that say about your story? To the public, Taylor's silence spoke volumes. She wasn't issuing denials. She wasn't cleaning up Blake's mess. And she wasn't jumping in to play neutral. She was absent, deliberately absent, and in the eyes of many, that absence was confirmation. People started asking hard questions. Why would Taylor cut her off so completely if Blake hadn't crossed a major line? Why would one of the most media-savvy women in the world risk headlines and fan backlash unless she was absolutely certain? Taylor's silence became the thread that unraveled everything, and it didn't stop with fans. People inside the industry were watching too, executives, producers, brand partners. When Taylor Swift, someone known for her meticulous loyalty, completely distances herself from someone, it matters. Because in a world built on image, trust, and relationships, when Taylor Swift decides you're not trustworthy anymore, that echo travels far beyond headlines. It hits reputations, it hits deals, and it hits credibility. Blake knew it. That's why she kept trying to spin the narrative, but Taylor wasn't playing anymore. Taylor wasn't going to be used anymore. Because what Blake had done wasn't just name dropping, it wasn't just exaggerating, it was weaponizing a friendship, turning someone's identity into a tool for manipulation, using another person's brand, their trust, their name, their silence as a ladder. And the moment Taylor realized that, she made a choice not just for herself but for everyone else watching. For anyone who's ever been exploited, for anyone who's ever been used. She wasn't going to defend herself in interviews. She wasn't going to leak anonymous quotes. She wasn't going to play the celebrity game of quiet reconciliation. Just to protect someone else's image, she was going to go silent, and that silence, it spoke louder than any headline Blake could plant. But the real cost of that silence was yet to come, because once Taylor stepped away, so did the one thing Blake still had left, credibility. In the end, this wasn't just a friendship falling apart. It was a masterclass in how power warps relationships, how fame, ego, and desperation can twist even the most personal bonds into tools of manipulation. Blake didn't just lose Taylor, she exposed herself. Because what this story really reveals isn't about two celebrities going their separate ways. It's about what happens when someone confuses access for ownership, when someone mistakes proximity to power as permission to use it. Blake thought Taylor's name was a shortcut, a brand she could borrow, a guarantee she could stamp onto a project to make it bulletproof. But that's not how friendship works. And it's definitely not how trust works. Taylor didn't end the friendship because of a lawsuit, or a rumor, or a scandal. She ended it because Blake lied repeatedly. Blake created a fantasy where Taylor was her creative partner, her shield, her silent endorser because it made her look more powerful. And when things started to unravel, she doubled down. She kept pushing, kept spinning, kept dragging Taylor's name deeper into the storm, until Taylor had no choice but to draw a line. No more calls, no more kindness, no more cover, because even someone as private, loyal, and image conscious as Taylor Swift has a breaking point. And when she hit it, she made one thing crystal clear: you don't get to exploit me, not for fame, not for power, not even if we used to be friends. And for anyone watching, whether it's fans, brands, or industry insiders, the message hit like a warning. If Blake Lively could do this to Taylor Swift, who else might she be using? Because when someone shows you who they really are over and over again and you still choose to ignore it, that's on you. But Taylor didn't ignore it. She faced it quietly, cleanly, and permanently. And the silence that followed, that was the sound of a door closing for good. So what really ended one of Hollywood's most talked about friendship? Not a scandal, not a betrayal caught on camera, not even a lawsuit. It ended the moment Taylor Swift saw the truth that someone she trusted had been using her all along, that her name, her silence, her support had become leverage in a game she never agreed to play. And once that realization hit, Taylor didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't perform damage control. She just walked away. In a world where everyone wants the last word, Taylor let her absence do the talking. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching, friends, fans, and enemies alike, that power doesn't come from speaking louder. Sometimes it comes from saying nothing at all. Because when someone lies about you, uses your name to gain power, and then threatens you when you won't play along, that's not friendship. That's manipulation. And Taylor Swift, she's done playing along. So now the real question is, if your closest friend used your name to boost their own career, then turned on you the moment you stepped away, would you ever forgive them? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories and exposed Hollywood secrets, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because we're just getting started. Thanks for watching.